In today's show, we're going to be talking about photographing wildlife and signs you're scaring the out of them. Hey everyone, welcome into Magnolia Photography. I'm Jeff House and I'm a wildlife photographer in Charleston, South Carolina. Excuse me today, I am getting over a cold and so the voice is just a little bit off today, but that's going to be the way it is. Anyway, we're talking about wildlife photography today, and we're talking about the importance of seeing the cues that maybe you're stressing out the animals, and that, we want to make sure that when we're out there photographing animals, whatever it may be, that we're being respectful of them and their environment and their lives. And it's important to understand that while we take wildlife for granted many times, there's a lot going on there that we just may not be aware of. We may not be picking up the signs, we may not be picking up the cues, right? But we do. We need to pay attention to this stuff. It's important, and it's not worth completely disrupting whatever you're photographing, right? Whether it be birds, animals, whatever the case may be. It's not worth getting the shot if you are completely stressing them out and making them feel like you are just a complete predator stalking them and looking to hurt them. And there are so many things that we can do as photographers that can give them that perception. And so I want to talk about a couple of things very quickly, a couple of things that, stories that I've heard, and one experience that I just recently had. And it just, to me, goes to show how so many people just disregard wildlife and don't show much respect for wildlife. And they're just very selfish in many regards. So my wife and I moved from upstate New York to Charleston, South Carolina. I've mentioned that several times. But after moving down here to South Carolina, we heard a story about an area that was north of where we lived in New York. It was up in the Adirondack Park. And there were these bears who were, habitating in this particular area of the Adirondack Park. And people would go there all the time, apparently, to hike and have lunch and do different things. But recently, the mother bear and her cubs had to be put down. And the reason for this was because people were showing up, and because the bears were in the area, they were feeding them, and then they were also trying to take selfies with the bears in the background. And so they would lure them in with the food and do different things. Well, recently, they were throwing apples and different pieces of food at the bears. The bears became agitated and then made a move on the humans, right? So they showed signs of aggression. And of course, this led to the bears being put down. So here are the humans coming into the world of the bears, basically agitating them, throwing food at them, trying to take selfies, right? Just being completely selfish. And they've created a situation that ended very negatively. This is what animals do. You are in their home. You are agitating them. You are the problem, and yet they are the ones that suffer. Imagine for a second a stranger coming into your yard, your home, throwing things at you, taking pictures of you. I'm pretty certain that none of us watching this video are going to respond to that positively, right? We're going to provide some sort of aggressive behavior back, right? Whether it's forcefully pushing people off our property, threatening them, whatever the case may be. I think we can all agree a situation like that doesn't end well. So last weekend, we had to travel back to New York for a wedding. And so I took my camera and I was at a local park and I was photographing some ducks. And there are a couple different ponds in the park that I was in, but every pond is clearly marked with signs that says, do not feed the ducks, right? There's an overpopulation problem, and obviously feeding the ducks is only going to serve to increase that problem, and the number of ducks will quickly grow out of control. Now, these ducks, because they are in a park, are also very used to humans. And so they will walk right up to you. As I was sitting there photographing the ducks, I was walking to different areas around the pond, and I would kind of like kneel down to get a lower angle, and I was taking these pictures. Ducks would walk right up to me like nothing, right? Which is, that is not common. As a matter of fact, if you come across ducks in the wild, they tend to be very skittish. And if you're, coming up to them, it's usually a good time where you want to be using some sort of camouflage and really kind of sitting in one spot, not doing a lot of moving around, because they tend to really scare easily. So this is kind of odd behavior for the ducks. But again, they're in an environment where there's a lot of humans. They're used to that activity. And so they do approach you because they're looking for food. And a lot of people do feed them, even though the signs say do not feed them. So as I'm sitting here photographing the ducks, I'm actually sitting on a park bench at the time, right? Not what you typically hear when it comes to wildlife photography, but the ducks are pretty much right in front of me in this pond, and I'm sitting on this bench taking my photos, and suddenly this old man walks up, and it was the grandfather of what was with a young boy that was with him. And so as I'm sitting there and the ducks are just going about their normal, part of the day, some are sleeping, some are swimming, some are bathing in the water, they're doing whatever, but they're doing what they do in their life. So this guy walks up and he starts breaking out a bag of food, and he gives it to his grandson, who is, I don't know if I had to estimate, probably 3-4 years old. And so they just start feeding the ducks. So as I'm sitting here photographing the ducks, and they can clearly see that I am not all that far from them photographing the ducks. But as they start feeding the ducks, now all of the ducks that I was photographing, they all start to move and swarm this little boy who has broken out this bag of food and is feeding the ducks probably 15 feet from the sign that says, "Do not feed the ducks." So first of all, that's very inconsiderate, right? I'm sitting there photographing, you start feeding, and now you've completely interrupted what I am doing. So this is just the mentality, though, of people today. It's who gives a crap, right? I'm going to do what I want to do when I want to do it. So nonetheless, all the ducks go over, and I just look at the guy and I shrug my shoulders like, what the F are you doing? And of course, no sorry, no nothing, no care whatsoever. Just goes on feeding the ducks, ignoring the sign that says, "Do not feed them." And so I go over to the other pond and I'm photographing the ducks, and I look back a couple minutes later, and now this guy, he had a little camera around his neck. He's a professional, I'm sure. But now he is photographing his young grandson chasing the ducks around the grass area. Now, this may not seem like a big deal to many of you out there. I don't know. But for those who are around wildlife, those who understand wildlife and appreciate it, understand that to the grandfather, this probably was cute, right? He's doing it for his own selfish reasons, though. He's taking photos of this kid while he's running around chasing the ducks. Well, that'll be great for the family photo. But meanwhile, to the duck and to their world, this kid is a predator. He's chasing them, right? They don't like that. There's a reason why they're jumping and flying away and quacking and making lots of noise when the kid is running after them. But this is just another complete disregard for wildlife and for the respect of wildlife. And so I think it's important as wildlife photographers, yes, we want to get those amazing shots. We want to get those beautiful shots, those shots that just wow you, right? But at what price do we get those shots? And that's kind of the subject of today's video. Some of the signs that we should be looking for as wildlife photographers so that we understand when the animals, the birds, whatever, is becoming stressed, is uncomfortable, and maybe when we would be better served to just walk away or leave the area for a few minutes, let the bird calm down, let the animal calm down, and then we can return at another time, whether it be that same day, just a little bit later, or maybe just another day altogether. But there are some signs that we can look for, some visual cues that they will give us when they are starting to feel threatened. We need to understand that many of the things that we can do may not seem like a big deal to us, but they come across as very threatening to them. I've mentioned this before in previous videos. The act of moving your hands, right? Maybe you're focusing your lens. Maybe you're changing a setting on your camera. But the fingers on our hands, right, especially how skin reflects light, can come across as very threatening to the animals. And they will notice all of these little digits moving, right? They have that keen eyesight that's going to notice these types of things. And it's going to scare them, and it's going to make them uncomfortable, and it's going to make them want to leave, or it's going to stress them out. Whatever the case is, we need to be paying attention to these things. So when I am out there photographing wildlife, one thing that is just overall good practice is to move slowly, right? Don't do abrupt, erratic, very quick movements. That will only serve to scare whatever it is that we're photographing. So that's one big thing. The other thing is don't stare at them, right? Use your head to, look to the side, whatever side that may be. Use your peripheral vision as a way to kind of monitor whatever it is that you're photographing. But staring at them, just staring down like you're staring down the barrel of a gun, right? That comes across as very threatening as well. If you were out in public and someone was just standing there, staring at you, that would come across as, what the hell is your problem, right? Why are you staring at me like that? It would come across, it would make you feel uncomfortable, definitely make you feel uneasy. So it's the same thing for the animals that we're photographing. So don't stare at them. It's okay to look at them, but for the most part, make it glancing. Use the peripheral vision as a way to monitor them without being threatening or aggressive. Be careful of your noises too, right? That you may have. If you're able to have a camera in which you can shoot using the electronic shutter where the noise is much less or even silent, those may be things you want to consider. Now, this, of course, could be driven by how close you are in relation to the animals, but keep in mind that they have very keen hearing. So even from quite a distance, they will be able to hear the mechanical shutter clicking, and that could provide some sort of stress to the animals. So these are things that we want to be mindful of when we are out there. Now, a lot of people will ask, well, should I be wearing camouflage? Well, this really all depends, again, with the type of animals you're shooting and where you're also photographing them, right? Because if you go to the situation like I had where I was in a park and the animals are around humans a lot, there's not much that camouflage is going to do. They are fully aware that you're there. You're not fooling them by wearing any kind of camouflage. So no, in that case, it's not going to be the most beneficial thing. But again, those same ducks, right? If you are out where there is a pond that does not frequently have humans visiting it, maybe people come and go here and there, but for the most part, the ducks aren't used to human interaction or seeing humans, then yes, that could be a time where it's very, very useful. And what I would recommend in a situation like that is, one, get to a low shooting position, wear some sort of camouflage. Sometimes you can see like camouflage nets. You can get them off Amazon really cheap. I think less than $10 or certainly less than $20. But it's kind of like a little camouflage blanket that you can kind of just drape over yourself and, your head. So those can be very beneficial things that will allow you to get up to the edge of the pond and photograph the ducks without scaring them too much. But remember, cover your face, cover your hands. These tend to be a lot of the body parts that the animals will see and respond to negatively because these are the things that come across as threatening to them. So those are things to consider when it comes to camouflage, is where you're photographing and what you're photographing. It can be useful in some cases and not very useful in others. What are some signs, though, that maybe you are just stressing the hell out of the animals? Well, one of the first things is going to be their vocalization, right? Are they making hissing sounds? If you're photographing birds, are they suddenly making loud chirping sounds, right? They just look agitated. They can't sit still. They're kind of like pacing in place, right? One foot to the next. And they're doing that chirping or they're doing that hissing, whatever the animal is that you're photographing. These are signs that the animal is become uncomfortable. And it's best at that point to slowly just back away, exit the area, maybe go to a position where you can see the animal, but they can't see you. Wait till they calm down before you attempt to go back into that environment and before you try to photograph them again. If you can obviously get to a location where you can still see the animal and photograph them without them seeing you, then obviously that is the ideal situation. But if you do have to be in the open, then the best thing that I can suggest to you is move slowly, move very, very slowly. And, just take your time and keep inching your way up to where you need to get in order to photograph the animal. If they become agitated again, then it might just be best to leave the situation so that you don't cause too much stress. Another sign that you might be stressing out the animals is if they start staring at you, they start locking their eyes on you. If you make a sound and they turn and look at you and they're just frozen there, right? And that's kind of another thing, is just freezing their body. Like they're pretending like if they freeze, you can't see them suddenly, right? Those are a couple of signs that you have started to stress them out. They start to freeze. They start to stare at you. They start to watch you very closely. Those are all signs that you are making them uncomfortable. You're infringing upon their little space. And that's a good sign at that point that you need to back away. And again, just like we were talking, back away, come back a little bit later. Try to get to a spot where you are a little bit more hidden and they're not so focused on you and they can relax a little bit more and be a little bit more natural in their environment. Another sign that you might be stressing them out is their posture, right? Maybe they become, like I was just saying a second ago, maybe they become very fidgety, or maybe they start to kind of duck their head down, or if they're an animal with a tail, maybe they start tucking it between their legs. If it's a bird, they might start really fluffing up their feathers when they're staring at you, or they freeze and fluff up their feathers, right? Those are all defense mechanisms that they can use against other prey out in the wild. Those are ways to make themselves look bigger and appear more intimidating to the things that want to eat them. So if they are fearful of you, if you're coming into their scene, coming into their environment, and they're uncomfortable, they're going to start doing these things. They're going to start fluffing their feathers. They're going to start that chirping. They're going to become fidgety, or they might completely freeze, thinking that maybe if they don't move, you won't see them. So these are all things that we need to take as visual cues, as audio cues that, hey, you're making me uncomfortable and you are coming into my world, right? We need to be really, really cautious about these different signs because we never know what we are stepping into as humans. Again, it's very easy to take for granted what wildlife is doing, that wildlife is out there, but we need to remember that there could be many different things going on that we don't want to interrupt. It could be a female bird, animal, what have you, in the middle of birthing, right? We don't know. May not look obvious to us, but that could be taking place. Could be a mother bird trying to feed her young babies, and that is essential that they get their nutrients, right? That they're being fed properly. They're getting enough to drink. All these things that the mother bird is responsible for doing, or the mother animal is responsible for doing. We don't want to interrupt that. We need to let nature take its course, and let their young grow up healthy and strong, and make sure that we're not interrupting those feeding and drinking sessions. So that's very, very key. We also could be stepping in on just any bird eating, right? Whether it doesn't matter if it's a baby, it might just be an adult. But we have to remember that animals out in the wild, right? Food doesn't come as easy as it does to us. They have to work a little bit more for their food. They have to work a little bit more to eat. And so if we come in and we interrupt a session to where they're feeding, well, that could be pretty detrimental to them. That could really throw some things off. And we don't want to do that. We just want to be very respectful of those sessions. Recently I came across a great blue heron in the lagoon that I often talk about where I live. And it was early morning, and the bird was in a feeding session. And now he was pretty close to me. I was walking along the edge of the lagoon, and he was in the water. And so he was probably only 30 or 40 feet from me. And, I was very aware of his behavior. So when I first got there, he kind of stopped, did the freezing thing, was, kind of looking in an angle where he could clearly see what I was doing. And he was just kind of checking me out. So during that time, I froze myself, right? I didn't stare at the bird. I looked away. I did everything to not be threatening to the bird, right? With him freezing, I froze. And so eventually, after just a couple minutes, the bird relaxed and went back to walking along the shore. And I kind of followed him as he went down the lagoon. And I did so very quietly. I did so very softly, right? I didn't move quickly. And I didn't scare the bird. At no point did my presence interfere with his eating. He went and did his normal thing, right? He did what he had to do for his morning food. And at no time did I interrupt that. So those were the things that I was looking for as I was doing that, right? I was looking for those signs of the bird becoming stressed, becoming agitated, becoming uncomfortable. And if that had happened, then I would have just had to slowly back away, regardless of the number of photographs I would have taken or the types of shots that I would have captured. And I got some good shots during that session, but sometimes you just have to sacrifice that for the sake and the well-being of the animal. All right, guys, that's going to be it for today. I just wanted to talk about this because of the recent story that I heard about the bears and the experience that I recently had with the ducks. And it really just came to mind that sometimes people just don't give a crap about, the safety or the respect of animals out in wildlife. And I want to make sure that as wildlife photographers, we're doing our part to lead by example. So I hope that you picked up on that today. What did you think about this? Is this new to you? Is this stuff that you worry about? Is it something that you're more aware of now? I'd love to know your thoughts. Please share them in the comments below. If you found this helpful, please be sure to consider subscribing to the channel, like it, and maybe even share it too, so we can kind of spread the word about the importance of being respectful for wildlife. Thanks so much. Can't wait to see you guys in the next video. Till then, take care.